we learn about God this morning. We've got songs and stories and memory verse. Let's go have some fun together.
We have a wonderful story today about Jesus' resurrection from the dead. As we know, he died on the cross for us, and we heard how he was taken down and put in a tomb, but it was right at the time of Passover, and so they weren't able to finish preparing Jesus' body for the burial by perfuming and putting lovely spices on it to make it sweet smelling. Instead, they had to leave because they couldn't get dirty by touching a dead body before having the Passover. So the men that were putting Jesus in the tomb had to leave. But there were some women and they followed, and they were Mary Magdalene and Mary, the mother of Josias. And they were watching from a distance. Studying and looking to see where they had put the body of Jesus. Now this was very important because they were going to have to go away for one whole day, do the Passover, and then they were going to come back with the spices, and they wanted to make sure they got the right grave in the right place. They didn't want to lose where he'd been laid. So, meanwhile, Jesus, while he's laying, his physical body is laying dead in the tomb, he's not there, because our physical body is just like a home, a house for our soul and our spirit. And Jesus was very much alive. And so he was down in hell. He'd gone down to hell. Why would Jesus go to hell? He's the Son of God. Shouldn't he have gone to heaven? Well, he had some important things to do. In Revelations chapter 1 verse 18, it tells us he had to go and get the keys of death and hell from the devil. He snatched those keys from him and said, you no longer can lock these gates and stop anybody from getting out. I am going to take them from you, and the power of being the boss of hell is broken, and now I'm the boss over death and hell. So Jesus took the keys. He did something else too. It tells us in Ephesians 4:8 that when Jesus ascended, he led captive a whole host of people that had been captive. In other words, when people had died before Jesus died on the cross, all the other people that had ever lived before, who tried to live according to the 10 Commandments and had failed because everyone wasn't able to do it, they were all being held in a place called Hades, and they were being held there by the enemy. But Jesus, not only did he take the keys for it, he also went and preached to those that were held captive there and told them all what he was doing, and if they believed in him, that then they would come with him and they would be able to go to heaven. Jesus died on the cross. There was a giant earthquake that tore the veil of the temple when Father God came down, and the ground quaked and shook. And in that time of the earthquake, many dead people rose up back to life again. And they believed they were the ones that Jesus had gone and spoken to, as well as the saints that had already believed in God and tried their best to live the 10 Commandments. They rose up at that time to go to heaven. How exciting. So, while Jesus was doing business down in hell with the enemy, the Pharisees and the chief priests had been talking, and they were getting concerned. They were worried because Jesus had said in 3 days he was going to rise. So they decided to go to Pilate, and they said to Pilate, we're really concerned. Do you remember when Jesus was alive? He said in 3 days he's going to rise from the dead. Imagine if the disciples steal his body to make it come true and make it pretend that Jesus rose from the dead after 3 days. That lie would cause more destruction than anything else to us. So we've got to stop him. Now, we had better do something straight away before anybody discovers where they've buried him and then steals his body. And so Pilate says, well, fine, take the soldiers, go with your soldiers, march to the tomb and stand guard at the tomb. And so a whole cohort, a lot of men, went and stood guard at the tomb. They also put a seal on the tomb. Over the edge of the tomb, they put a seal so they would know if anybody had gotten in there to steal the body of Jesus. And so they were all standing guard all night, not falling asleep, standing very strong, looking all the time, anything that moved, checking and making sure nobody was coming. And then suddenly, while they're doing that and standing guard, there was a giant lightning strike. Lightning, can you imagine how loud that would have been? A strike of lightning coming down straight over the top of where they were onto the tomb. It was an angel. An angel came very quickly, he moved very fast like lightning, from heaven down to earth, and the soldiers fell down as dead men. Oh! And then they got up and ran away. Meanwhile, Mary Magdalene and some of the other ladies were coming back, Remember, they were going to come back and perfume the body of Jesus and add the spices to the body. And Mary knew exactly where the grave was, so she was leading a whole heap of ladies with her to go and do the perfuming and preparation of Jesus' body. And as they got there, they were talking and saying, who's going to remove the big stone? I mean, it's such a big stone. I don't have the muscles to remove it. Do you have the muscles to remove it? Oh no, I definitely don't have the muscles to. What are we going to do to remove this big stone? We've brought no men with us. When they got there, they were surprised. The stone was rolled away. And Mary thought, what's happened? She rushed on into the tomb. She ran down into the tomb and she looked around everywhere. He's not here. Oh no, somebody's taken Jesus. And she ran off to go and find Peter and the other disciples. The other ladies were still in shock. Well, they were looking around inside the tomb too and going, where is that Jesus? Maybe Mary got the wrong place. And they're looking around, and then suddenly 2 men in very bright, shining clothes came into the tomb. Hello, they said. Don't be afraid. But guess what? The ladies were petrified. They were scared, silly. They were shaking and trembling so much. They got such a fright. I mean, I would too if I was inside a dark cave called a tomb and suddenly 2 very bright men came in, dazzling white clothes, shiny and bright like the sun, suddenly came into the room. That would frighten me too, and I'm sure it'd frighten you. Well, the youngest of the 2 men said, I know what you're doing. You are here looking for Jesus who was crucified, aren't you? I want to know, why do you seek the living in among the dead? He is not here, for he has risen. See, he told you that he would rise again, and he has. Come look, see where he was lying. Look here, he was laying right here. This is where his body was, and it's no longer there. Go and tell the other disciples what you have seen, and tell them to head on to Galilee, because Jesus is going to meet you all at Galilee. And then the angel disappeared. Well, the ladies were quite shaken by this and astonished at the whole thing. And guess what? They did not go and tell the disciples. They did not go anywhere near them. They went wandering off, frightened and trembling and shaking at what they'd seen, that they didn't go anywhere near the disciples. Now, Peter and John and the other disciples had heard what Mary had said. Mary Magdalene had finally reached them with her story that the tomb was empty and she didn't know where Jesus was. And so Peter and John got up, left the house and started running to the tomb, running and running. Now Peter was running slower than John. John ran really fast. John got there, looked inside the tomb and didn't see anything and was like, I wonder what happened. Then Peter pushed past him, entered into the tomb and looked and saw where Jesus had been laying. The linen was neatly folded, sitting there. And he was like, wow, that is unusual. Then he remembered. Now, the Pharisees had remembered that Jesus said he was going to rise in 3 days, but now finally Peter remembered. Jesus had said something about rising in a few days. And the linen's here that had the body wrapped in it. And he's gone. And they believed. Both Peter and John believed. And they left the tomb very excited, remembering that Jesus had told them that he was going to rise from the dead. Now, Peter and John left to go back to their own home. And Mary, who had finally caught up with them, she hadn't been running like she'd gotten to the tomb, and by the time she got there, she had been crying quite heavily. Oh, where have they put Jesus? Oh God, he's gone, what are we going to do? We can't find Jesus. And then she's crying and crying, and she comes back to the place of the tomb where she'd seen them bury him, where they put his body the day before, but where was he now? Oh, I don't know. She was very, very upset when suddenly, again, ba-boom, the two angels appeared and said, "Woman, why are you weeping?" And Mary said, "Because I don't know where you've taken my Lord, and where he is." And then she heard a noise behind her, and she looked behind, and there was a man standing there out in the garden outside the tomb. Well, she thought, it must be the gardener. He'll know. So she came up to the man, and he said, "Woman, why are you weeping so much? Who are you looking for?" And Mary said to him, "I know you've taken him somewhere. What have you done with Jesus' body? You've moved him, haven't you? Where? Please, tell me where you've put him." And while she's saying this, Jesus suddenly says to her, he wasn't the gardener, it was Jesus. He said, "Mary." And as soon as he said Mary, she suddenly went, "Oh, teacher, it's you." She was so surprised, so shocked. She stopped crying immediately, and she grabbed hold of Jesus. She was holding on to him tightly. She wasn't going to lose him again. And what's more, he was alive, and she was clinging tight. And Jesus said to her, "Mary, stop. Stop clinging to me. I've not yet ascended to my Father. I have to take my blood up to the mercy seat in heaven. I haven't yet gone up there. Stop hugging me and touching me. Instead, go tell the other disciples what you've seen. Go and tell them." So she rushed off. "Hello, everybody! All you disciples, Jesus is alive! Woo-hoo!" And she told everyone that Jesus was alive. All the disciples that had been gathered together. But guess what? The disciples refused to believe her. They thought she was just a woman making up a whole heap of stories who was distressed and seeing things. Meanwhile, the soldiers that had gotten such a fright and had run away gathered themselves together and found courage to go and tell the chief priest and the Pharisees what had happened. They said, "We were standing there, we were guarding it, we were doing our job, we were protecting the tomb, we'd sealed it, we were making sure that nobody was going to come steal the body. There was a lot of us there, we were really strong and none of us slept. But we couldn't stop what happened. This giant lightning bolt came down, and an angel came down, rolled back the tomb. We got such a fright. We all fell over like dead men for a while. And then we came back together. The life came back into us, and we ran off, petrified and scared. We weren't going to stick around. But that body's definitely, Jesus is definitely risen. That body's definitely no longer in the tomb. What are we going to do with these soldiers?" They wanted to punish them, but instead they thought, "I know, we'll reward them. We'll give them a bag of money, lots of money, and we'll tell them to make up a story that the disciples had come and stolen the body of Jesus and hidden it somewhere else, and that they were going to make up a story that he'd risen from the dead. And that way we'll get on top of it." And so the guards were very happy to receive the money, and they decided to go and tell the lie. So they told anybody they could. And you know, to this day, there are some people that still believe that lie, that Jesus' body wasn't risen from the dead, but instead it was stolen and moved, that overcome 100 soldiers and managed to open that big tomb and moved it all by themselves. People believed that lie because it was easier than believing that the power of God could raise somebody up from the dead. Somebody that had been dead 3 days, he rose. That's a long time to be dead, isn't it? But the power of God is such that he can raise people from the dead, and he rose Jesus that day. Well, meanwhile, remember those women? They were all wandering around, petrified and trembling. They'd been told by the angels to go and tell the disciples about Jesus' body being risen from the dead. But remember, they'd been too scared to do it. Well, they finally got some courage together, and they were still together heading towards the disciples when suddenly Jesus appeared to them. Just like he'd appeared to Mary Magdalene, now Jesus came to the other group of women, and they fell at Jesus' feet and kissed it and cried, oh, you're here, you're alive. They were so excited to see Jesus. And Jesus said to them, yes, now you know I have risen. Go on, continue. Go and tell the other disciples that are over in that house weeping and mourning. And so they continued on their way. When they got to the house, they found the disciples still mourning and weeping and not believing the stories of Mary Magdalene who'd returned to them, nor did they believe the stories of Peter and John who had also returned to the disciples at the house and told them. But they didn't believe the women either, they said. The disciples refused to believe that Jesus was alive. How sad that is. But we'll wait and see what happens. I'm sure Jesus will reveal himself to the disciples somehow. Watch the next few weeks to find out. Let's pray together, children. God, we just want to say thank you that you rose Jesus from the dead and that Jesus defeated death, broke its power from off our lives, that we might also rise up to be with you in glory and to live in heaven with you. I thank you for your power and your might and your strength is so wonderful. And I thank you, Jesus, that you have defeated the devil and that you've gained victory for all of us. Amen. In today's story, we heard about how Jesus died and was buried. And while he was buried, he went to hell and he took the keys of death and hell from the devil. And he removed the power that the devil had previously over our lives. When a person died, they always went down to Hades or to hell, and that's where they remained until able to be taken up to heaven. But today, because of what Jesus has done for us, the sting of death has been broken. So while we still die, it's not a big deal. It's just like us moving from this room to another room. But that room is now with the Lord. It says to be absent from the body is to be present with the Lord. The Bible tells us that. And so the sting of death, the power of death, has been broken over our lives. No longer is the enemy got that power to hold us captive when we die. But as Christians, when we die, we go home straight away to heaven to be with the Lord. So let's look at our memory verse today. So our verse today is found in 1 Corinthians 15:55. O death, where is your victory? O death, where is your sting? So we're going to have to try to remember these verses because I'm wearing a hat that has a sting in it, as a bee does, and I'm going to burst one of these balloons. So today's verse is found in 1 Corinthians 15:55. O death, where is your victory? O death, where is your sting? We're going to burst one of these like a bumblebee does, has a sting, and we're going to burst one of these balloons and see if you can remember what it said. 1 Corinthians 15:55. O death, where is your victory? O death, where is your sting? Oh! Let's see if we can remember it. 1 Corinthians 15:55. O death, where is your victory? O death, where is your sting? Okay, you ready? Oh! 1 Corinthians 15:55. O death, where is your victory? O death, where is your sting? Let's go again. It ain't bursting. O death, where is your sting? It's broken by the power of Jesus. No victory and no sting for death.